when we were on Call of Duty, my focus was in bringing a new story to the Nazi zombies. What if we go really dark on this?
Yeah.
We're already doing World War II, and so let's dip into some of the actual horrific experiments that the Nazis performed.
Welcome to the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we unpack the messy, beautiful intersection of creativity and business with the artists, marketers, and founders shaping our culture. Hey friends, I'm Carl, founder of AAA, and I'm the host of the Pixel Retentive Podcast, where we share our thoughts on creativity, art, and business. Past guests include Tim Thompson, founder of Reinventing, Mario Kroll, founder of Uber Strategist, and Anthony Deptula, president of BMP Creative. I'm forever grateful for the supporters of this podcast, and we are always open to more sponsors that align with our brand. That said, Pixel Retentive is brought to you by Epic Made. Epic Made is a creative studio helping brands turn big ideas into unforgettable animated content, campaign, visuals, and story-driven creative that actually connects and turns viewers into fandom. We work with the best brands in gaming, entertainment, tech, and pop culture to make their ideas feel bigger, clearer, and harder to ignore. So if your brand has a campaign, launch, pitch, or story that needs to stand out, visit epicmade.net and let's make something epic. All right, so with us today, we have Cameron Dayton. How you doing, Cameron? Welcome to the show.
Doing great, Carl. Thanks for having me over here.
Really pumped to have you, man. This is going to be fun. So Cameron is a 2K studio right now. He's at Cat Daddy, which is a 2K studio. And Cameron is an acclaimed creative and narrative director whose career spans more than 2 decades across some of the most successful franchises in gaming, including Overwatch, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, NBA, and NBA 2K. He has helped shape player experiences at industry leaders such as Activision Blizzard, BioWare, 2K, and Scopely, seamlessly integrating narrative depth with innovative game design. Let's see. Beyond games, Cameron has written screenplays for independent film and is the author of the best-selling cyberpunk novel Aetherwalker, now contracted into a trilogy. Sorry, did I say that right? Aetherwalker, right?
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
I'm stumbling a little bit today. I apologize, guys. It's Monday. But anyways, we got through the part where I read things. On to the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So before we jump into today's topic, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit better. So how long have you been in the industry, and maybe what do you define that as, and what project are you most proud of so far?
Yeah, I mean, industry, it's tricky to say. I got my start while I was still in college. I shifted from a well-intended pre-medicine career into a 3D animation. And I was at BYU at the time. They just had a big donation of hardware and software, and so was able to be one of the first 2 to graduate with that degree with Donald Mustard, who went on to be a partner of mine in Chair Entertainment, and I think he went on to be the creative director over at Epic Games over Fortnite for a while.
Oh wow!
So yeah, I was while in college, I got started at a little studio called Zygote, and Zygote did 3D animated models for the big screen. And they did like the Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie. Remember, there's a ship that's torn apart and tipped over. Did some of those models, and I did other like medical 3D imaging, and it was a great way to get in to understand just the DNA of what goes behind digital images. Yeah, from there, Donald and I graduated, and we co-founded a little studio called Chair Entertainment, and it was just 6 of us. There was a bunch of other of our colleagues from school, and we started out making little games with Xbox Live Arcade. Had a great kind of intro into the industry, so we did a couple fun games in that space. One called Undertow, and another that was built out with Orson Scott Card co-wrote a story with us. He wrote a book called Empire about clashes between the 2 sides of the United States kind of philosophy. And we did a game called Shadow Complex built around that. It was kind of a G.I. Joe meets Metroid fusion, sort of an idea. A lot of fun. We kind of got some momentum going, um, but really the big game that I think kind of put our studio on the map was Infinity Blade, and that was a game that I was a part of the early kind of core concepting in. Um, the We were using the Unreal Engine at the time, and Epic Games. We had made some great connections with Epic at that point. They saw the inroads we were making with doing big cinematic narrative steps with the engine, and they ended up stepping in and buying out the studio. I at the time had started talking with Chris Metzen over at Blizzard, and the this is when I just had first started working on Ether Walker and on that franchise, and there was a lot of cool synchronicity with that and some new project they were working on called Project Titan, is the code word. So I popped over to Blizzard at that point and got on the Team Titan, and I was the world developer in that space, and it was a wild time. I mean, it was some of the premier players from all of Blizzard's hit titles were on that. We had Alex Afrasiabi, we had Chris Metzen was on there, Rob Pardo was on there, um, and really just Greg Kaplan was on there, Jeff Kaplan was on there, and um, it was a monstrous collection of talent putting together this idea, and a lot of it was trying to find the space where this game could be. And I know there have now been books that have been put out about this and a lot of talk about this, but it was an exciting time to be there where we are. The initial game was this monstrous MMORPG with three factions and built over a near modern, more kind of optimistic future. Um, and yeah, and a lot of it, the fun part is a lot of those elements have still survived through into the game, what eventually became Overwatch after a lot of shifting in the team and movement around. Um, and yeah, that was an adventure in and of itself. Let's see. Let me know if I'm going too descriptive in this, or you just need more
No,
bullet
no, have fun, man. Just let it rip. This is all great stuff. I have some questions within that if you want. So so I hear all these like really high level people that have done amazing things in the space, right? What is it like to have so many different, really impactful, storytellers and creatives on a project, and how do you guys do that dance of like, and I know in some states, I don't know any of those people personally, but egos can precede themselves sometimes, right? So like how does that dance happen, right? Like, is it the best idea wins with most of these people, or is it like it just depends on the individual or the project or that kind of stuff? Or
In this case, it was very. I think to be, especially a Blizzard, but in a lot of other studios, to be successful in games, you have to be able to subsume your ego and work in sync with everybody else that's on the team.
yeah,
It was a fun experience to be with these individuals where everybody brought their A game. Every the end of the week we'd always have a let's do a proposal of what are the ideas you've got, what have you been working on over the week, and generally, in most studios it would be a kind of just a stand up where everybody talks to what they've done. In this case, people would bring in PowerPoint presentations with music set to them and full on deck, and it was a riveting experience, a cinematic experience to be there with that team. Um, I actually from there I shifted over to the creative development team after that, and got to be work on story, uh, dialogue, and structure for all of the big Blizzard games. Um, but it was fun bringing that energy that came from that initial team into the rest of what's happening. And it really, at this point, this would have been 2008, 2009. It was a point where Blizzard was the name. There were 12 million subscribers to World of Warcraft. There was talk of the
yeah,
new Diablo, the new StarCraft, um, and yeah, everyone felt like they really needed to just bring their A game every day to the studio, and it was intimidating, but it was exciting too.
I bet. And Overwatch was the first new title they brought, like a new franchise
Yeah,
entirely that they brought in
yeah,
forever because they were
in
having
years.
so much success with Warcraft and StarCraft and
Mhm.
Diablo.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting on an actual Warcraft 4. and a StarCraft 3, maybe
Yeah.
World of StarCraft might be interesting, but like,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. So cool. I love that. So, what originally pulled you into storytelling in games, and which project you think shaped your philosophy on, narrative design the most?
Well, it's funny because in my mind, I've there've been stories in games ever since I started playing, Venture or, Space Invaders. I think
Yeah.
as the player, you bring your narrative take into a game. And I was always a big reader. I was always a big uh did writing, creative writing was always the even when I was doing my pre-med stuff, I always made sure I took a writing class and had an outlet for that. Um
Yeah.
and I can remember when it really hit was during, I mean, I know this is the class about Half-Life 2, when you realize that the storytelling could be a chilling, genre breaking, just a very eye-opening experience, with what was done with character and everything else. And this
Mm.
when the realization hit me that this is storytelling that's done with your audience. You don't have them sitting in a dark auditorium. They're not
Yep.
sitting passively waiting for a story to be given to them. Your audience is your protagonist, and that turns it into an adventure from every angle, from the telling to the receiving to the negotiating between the two sides. And I think that's really where it stopped for me, was like, what kind of storytelling are we going to do when we did, chair entertainment. One of the first things we want to do is let's reach out to authors. Let's see if we can. These are the masters of storytelling, and how can we work with them to build what we're doing. You know.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, it's interactive storytelling, right? There's not really a lot of platforms. I mean, you had your own, like, you choose your own adventure books for a while, but those
Oh
even,
yeah.
had
Let's be
limitations.
honest.
But
Those are games. Those are
oh
gamified
yeah,
books. I think.
they are.
And I can remember, how many books as a kid did you go back and reread over and over again? You want to talk about the power of that free agency in an adventure, in a narrative. Um, it's incredibly dry.
I love that. So what do you think separates great game storytelling from just good game storytelling?
Ah, well, so one of my favorite things about working with a game development team is that it's a team effort, and I compare that with writing my novel, which is a very a lonely solo effort. You've got some great editors, hopefully, and some people that are going to take part in that. But that's usually towards the tail end. But with a game, the story, yeah, almost more than any other, genre, maybe comparable to film, is not on its own little island. The story works if it's working with the art, if it's working with the design, if it's synchronized with, the style and the music and all these other elements. Um, and I think, some of the better stories that I've experienced in games have come through that, um, interaction within the game of music, art, and dialogue. I think, and design, which is often kind of so under the floorboards that people don't realize what they're appreciating is that, you know, the reward loop, or what's making them engage in a unique way. And
Mhm.
so I've gotten to a point where I can now tell when I'm playing a game, was this a story that was farmed out. Somebody wrote it and sent it in, and then they were just left to the developers to put together, versus when it was built with the team and by
Yeah.
the team, and I can't tell you how many times I've got the greatest little story. We got a fantastic, climax and resolution to this thing, and they're like, "Oh, guess what? Level 7, we cannot have the flying dragon brigade. You got to cut out, 7 of those dragons, and no flying, and now they can't breathe fire." Which was the whole point of the climax there. And now I've got to go back, last second, and do these kind of narrative acrobatics of turning this into something that is still as rewarding and exciting. But here's the funny thing: often you will find that those acrobatics help you uncover a better story. It sometimes is
Mm.
within those limitations that you can create your best stuff.
Yeah.
I know. Just to jump ahead, when we were on Call of Duty, my focus was in bringing a new story to the Nazi zombies. the wave-based game form. And this was the team that had worked on Dead Space years ago. So it was a team that knew horror, that knew how to do scary stuff. And up until then, it felt like the most of the zombie games that are made had been done a little tongue in cheek. And there was a lot of wit and kind of cleverness done around them. But I was like, what if we go really dark on this?
Yeah.
We're already doing World War II, and so let's dip into some of the actual horrific experiments that the Nazis performed. And we've got this great American library of Indiana Jones, and how the he explored these occultish deep dives with the Nazis. And so we put together something that I felt that the team was super excited about. They'd all brought in some great elements of this story of them finding an ancient weapon from Emperor Barbarossa, and had the power to return energy to the dead. And we were going to do a lot more straight science fiction and less hand waving that some of the games will do. Anyway, we thought it was great. We got news at the 11th hour again. It's always the 11th hour that,
Of course.
this, let's see, how much of this can I talk about? One of our expansions was
Yep.
built around a ships going across the ocean. And we were going to have this cool element where a submarine came up between the two ships, but only occasionally. So you would have to change your path as you moved around between these two ships, jumping onto the submarine occasionally, being relegated to just one in the meantime. Turned out one of our competitors had a map coming out that was very, very similar. And
Oh,
and we had, these especially the DLC content, we had a very small window of time to get these things out as we were rolling. And so I I pulled the whole team together. I said, listen, it's emergency time. I just ordered some pieces. We're going to sit here. We're going to brainstorm, let's come up with something really cool that can be better than this. We'd already built some of the assets. We already had boats. We already had all this stuff. Um,
and that
anyway,
was just coincidentally, right? Like you guys had like a convergence of
yep,
like
yep. I
ideas, but
I
yeah,
really believe when you've got creative people of a similar generation, that similar, media influences on upgrade, you're gonna
yep,
have a lot of that synchronicity.
yep,
And I think it's a waste of time to start pointing fingers on who's copying who. It really is just like, hey, great idea over there. It was also great. Let's see what we
yep,
can do. So I said, let's do
yep.
something unique. And I remember we had just hired on a new designer who was he had actually been making a lot of fan maps, and we just loved his creativity. And he had just been, he was younger. He was just kind of studying up on World War II. He's like, hey, turns out I was looking for bombing runs for one of our earlier things, and turns out one of the biggest bombing runs that happened in World War II was over this island just off the coast of Germany. And there it was, it was the largest pre-nuclear bomb in the history of warfare. I'm like, why did they do that? Nobody really knows. It was kind of, a forward base, I guess, for the Germans. So we're like, let's see what we can go with this. Pull up some pictures of this island, and it was this uniquely red rock kind of island. And we're like, wait, we can park some boats in there. What if we make that the place where the Nazis were generating the undead? And they did that because there was some pagan goddess on this island. We looked it up, and there was some of that historically on the island, and the whole team just like started clicking. We turned it into this story. It was the Darkest Shore was the expansion that we came up with. Ended up being the best expansion, my favorite part of the chapter, and it was all done absolutely last second by just having one of our newest guys pouring through the history and the whole thing built together. That's what I love about storytelling in games. Is it is this incredibly collaborative, and we Frankenstein this whole thing. We got boats. What can we use here? We
Yep.
can pull this in from earlier parts, and it all fit on this incredibly macabre, evil island. And in the end, one of the hooks with this was we wanted every part of our game to feel like it could have happened during the war itself, but it was all covered up or anything. Like, well, hey, in the end, it all gets bombed. So the final act of the game is us getting off the island before the bombing run hits, sort of thing. And so, anyway, that's the sort of thing that for me is an adventure just in the creation.
Yeah, and I love that it all comes down to the ninth hour, and there's like a
Yeah.
couple things that happen there, right? It's like it's not that like the people signing off on things weren't checking it along the way, but it wasn't the priority until it is the priority, and then it's like, oh, and then you go, oh, wait, we can't do that, and you got to do this,
Yeah.
and then next thing you know, you got to change things, and then but like the pressure's on, right? And you have all these people. at least half are probably ADD, just by nature of the industry. And it's like,
Yeah.
but when the pressure's on, that's like the mother of innovation, right?
Yeah.
Necessity, right? Like we got to figure this shit out right now.
It,
And
it,
then all the magic starts to flow. It's pretty cool. I've seen it
yeah.
happen in many
Yeah.
aspects. So
I mean, you don't want to artificially give pressure like that. Like there was something
no,
about the nature of it itself. But yeah,
no, because then
I've
people just get
wondered
pissed off, right? Like, yeah. Well, I guess
because
get
of
pissed off
the
both ways, but yeah,
ADHD nature of so many of our compadres here. Um, the a lot of them are kids who waited till the 11th hour to finish homework to do their other stuff, and I think it's drilled into us that like okay, the adrenaline hits, and now we're gonna bring everything to game, and it was amazing also though how it brought the whole team into this kind of bonding experience
yeah,
because we knew if I can bring this idea in, I know that our modelers can build this out great. And how can our texture guys bring this and the animators bring this and the designers bring this? Um, and there's an incredible amount of trust that goes across for you to surrender a great idea to a team and know that not only will it be honored and carried through, but was probably going to be made better through that iterative process.
yeah, absolutely. And then the rest is history, right? Like
Yeah,
it speaks for itself, which is
yeah,
really cool.
yeah. It went on to be a
Yeah,
very, very popular, series, and to this day, I still think is the scariest of the Nazi zombie, experiences that have been created. But, of course,
I
that's
love
just
it.
I'm proud of my team for doing that.
Amazing. So when you're working on these massive global brands that are already
Right.
established, like Call of Duty, and even the zombie part within Call of Duty, and like we mentioned, some of the big titles from Blizzard. Like, how do you integrate narrative depth and keep things fresh and like, but still within the like, hey, this is already the things that have happened, and this is kind of the tone that's set. We can't go off into left field. So,
Yeah.
what's some of your process there?
I think, narrative depth is an interesting thing. I think that's a very relative term.
Sure.
I think, I'm a big opponent to, exposition. I think the more that you can trust your audience to figure things out and put those pieces together, there's almost an appreciative, response to that and so you make sure you leave breadcrumbs in, this is what some characters are saying, and if the audience can put two and two together outside of this, or we have an answer somewhere in the geometry of the map, or somewhere in the easy thing to do is, oh, in this bookshelf over here, there's going to be the doctor's notes, or the the experimental log over here. I'm like, oh, that's what happened right there. And that was when I first saw that, there was a lot of that, of course, in Half-Life 2. And so I think in a lot of games now we're seeing the next step from that, which is okay, maybe you don't find those notes, but you find conclusions from those sort of notes. And so I think you know, it, as we talked about it, this is an art form that allows the audience to be that protagonist. And so you make sure if they want to know more than just the bare bones of what a great raw story, you make sure those details are in there somewhere for them to find out. Um, but then the added challenge is you got to make sure that your A story is still absolutely satisfying, even if they don't find out where the sword was found in the Antarctic, and the energy behind it and the studies behind the meteoric metal and yada yada. That like
Right.
you put that there because there will invariably be um, very small percentage of the super fans that want to dig into all that one. But we've found that that small percentage is also the most active, zealous. They're the ones that are posting. I remember we did a
Yes.
we looked at our numbers. This is when I was at Blizzard. The missions in World of Warcraft. Who reads all the mission? Who skips down to just what are the bullet points of what I need to turn in? Because a lot of our writers and the writers on the dev team would put in all sorts of clever writing and layered writing in that. Um, the sad fact was it was less than 5% of players read the mission. They go straight to what do I need to do? Where do I got to find the wolves, or how many skins got I added, and who do I got to take them to? That was depressing. But the the
Yes.
the opposite to that is that or not the opposite, but the inverse of that is that small percentage of those that do read in, they are your biggest evangelizers. They are the
Yep.
ones they live in that universe, and they are the most active posters on Reddit, on the forums, the most active in responding to, either in defense of or in critique of what
Oh yeah.
you've done. And you know what? It's worth it building for the ones that are going to live there, and so uh, that kind of depth. I think it's funny that I think a lot of writers that have been around in this industry for long enough realize that that's really who you're writing for. Um, but that writing can often act as an inspiration for them to go on and do fan fiction and to carry that on in their own creation. So it's even though it's a different size of audience, I would say generally, you recognize that the main story beats, which might not have the layered fanciness and the iambic pentameter of what you've been writing before, it still is going to get home with everybody who plays.
Yeah, I love that. And there's definitely, it just depends on what, mood you're in and what
Yep.
type of gamer you are and all the things, right? Like, when you're playing a game like WoW, right? And it's like
Yep.
you already don't have enough time to be fully playing this game if you're a responsible adult with like no trust fund, right? Like, and no
Right.
kids, and like, it's like I like, and like, whatever it is. So like there's such endless amounts of content. So yeah, it only makes sense that for the most part, people are just like, yeah, do the thing, let's go, like let me get
Right.
the new sword,
Right.
and I get it, right? And so it's that delicate balance of like making sure all the details are good, because the people that do pry in there, obviously, those are the ones that are the super fans that have the
Yeah.
time that
Yeah.
they are going to be enjoying those things. And like you said, that's that, especially in a like WoW is one of the biggest games on planet Earth, right? Like no one hasn't heard of WoW, but like
Right.
in these more, let's call them indie games or like
Mhm.
less prominent games, when you empower the details into the super fan, they're actually very good at spreading the word about
Yeah.
your company or your brand, your story, your game, in a way that like you're going to get a lot of ROI out of it. That's really hard to measure, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get that. And but you got to balance that side of too, where it's like sometimes like before they let you skip cutscenes, like, or some games that make you like force you to digest all of the content, and that just gets to be like counterproductive for me too sometimes, because again, I'm trying to sit, sometimes I just don't have time, like I want to play the game, but I can't do the whole deep story
You're
dive,
gonna
like,
lose people, and it's,
yeah.
like, I try to make sure, my professional duty is to be on top of, uh, storytelling in games and what's happening, what's being done right now, which means I have to play through a lot of games. That means I will have to do settings on easy, and I'll have to do, and sometimes I'll have to skip through, some of the stuff. I have to be, understand what the play experience is for that 95% who are just getting the main story beats and not the frosting, not the
Yep.
detail, not the,
Yep.
and I use that term deliberately. Like, I don't think it's frosting, but that's kind of how they see it.
Sure.
The experience needs to be satisfying, on multiple layers, and a
Yeah.
lot of times, you have to understand, what is most of my audience going to be looking for? What is most of my audience going to be playing on this? And I need to tune let's do a clumsy metaphor. I need to tune the tuba as well as the piccolo. They
Yeah.
all need to be playing on too.
And I've seen this done haphazardly, where it's like, okay, well, you can skip the cutscene, and now you have no clue what you're supposed to be doing, right? So, like,
Right.
there's all the different pieces of that. You have to go, hey, from a user experience side, like, let's say 95% of people are not going to watch this whole thing. They're not going to read
Yeah.
this whole thing. So it still has to make sense, but we still want the depth of story and narrative in there.
Yeah.
Which all that's fascinating. It's, if you're just a consumer of games, you don't probably think about the multiple ways you have to design a good game and work that story out. And I don't think the frosting is necessarily a negative connotation. Like, the meat of the game is the cake, right? Like, if the cake's good, the cake's good. You're gonna eat the cake, you're gonna love it, you're gonna tell your friend to have a slice of cake. And
Right.
the frosting on top, if you're into frosting, like, you definitely want that frosting. But
Yeah.
also, like, hey, maybe the frosting's too much. I don't have time for frosting today.
Right.
So
Well,
I
and
think
I
it's a
would
good analogy.
thank you. And I think the if have you ever had a good cake, but the frosting is what sends it? The frosting is what
Yeah.
makes it.
Oh,
The
yeah.
cake.
Like a nice
I know
buttermilk frost. Oh my God.
opinions are
Like,
divided on red velvet cake, right?
oh,
But you've got
sure, sure.
that kind of sour cream cheese sort of frosting on top that makes it like oh, this is memorable, this next level. And so
Oh
it's
yeah.
a and here's the funny thing. I think you could probably argue so many of the creative elements that go into a game are are that frosting, are that element, and it really is when a game brings it all together, that it becomes this memorable, impacting. I mean, there are games I've played that have they're in my DNA. It was such a whole body experience, um, that that no other form of media can ever go that deep. You know.
Yeah. Well, now you got to share. What are some of those
Oh,
games?
dude. I mean, we started talking about, Half-Life 2, and I think that was one that where I had chills, where I, literally had to scoot my, my chair back and take a moment to breathe. Um, I think, there were moments, and I don't think the Doom and the Quake and the Wolfenstein series get enough credit for what they did for us as players as far as our first attempt at immersion, at panic.
Yeah.
I can close my eyes and still imagine the sound of those doors opening in Quake or Doom. That you know,
Yep.
yeah, the first time you came across a beast, or got on one of those trampoline springs that shot you across half the map. And of course, one of the reasons I love World of Warcraft, the story of Arthas from Warcraft 3.
Yep.
Just a story where, wow, the good guy maybe is not so good, and wow, I've been playing as this character, and now he's making these horrible necessary decisions, and amazing how this fictitious character gives us insight into other actual characters in history. StarCraft, the the incredibly emotional story of the Protoss, and
Yep.
the how they my light for ire all of a sudden means something to you, uh, and geez, from there there's just countless games that have done such a great job of pulling us in. I know the BioShock series was absolutely um, heartbreaking. The way they talk about story, of sacrifice, and the way that
Yeah.
plays into our own histories. Again, they're kind of echoing a lot of what's going on. Um, and yeah, even up to recently, the Expedition 33, the I mean, I can go on about
Sure. Hey.
forever.
No.
There's
No
there's
worries.
there's so many great ways to dive into that. But then there's also the stories that we tell, and who am I as I play through this? To go back to I think the Half-Life story, where they didn't really give your character a whole lot of backstory, so you create that yourself. Why am I here? You know,
Yeah.
um, I think it is something that as a writer and creator we need to recognize. What's the space that we're giving for our audience protagonists to define themselves?
I love that, man. Yeah, I remember like, just as you're running through some of the games, like the first time I ever got like actually scared, like jump scared, and like, oh my god, I had that anxiety was playing Resident Evil on
Yeah,
PlayStation 1, like the
yeah,
first one. When the dog jumps out the window, I was like, oh shit.
yeah.
Like when it's like late at night and yeah.
And when you have a physical reaction to that, and so here's the funny thing, like watching a scary movie. I mean, there's some great scary movies out there. I'm a big
Of
fan
course.
of scary or horror films, but you can always do this, And how many times as a kid were you just kind of peeking through your fingers,
Yeah, yeah.
and so there's still this distance, but when you've got a controller in your hand and you can't look away because you'll die,
Yep.
it turns it into an entire different experience. You have to be there. You have to face the dog jumping through the window, the door opening up behind you,
Yeah.
the something grabbing your hands, the face hugger, crawling around in the dark laboratory,
Yep.
that just takes on another level.
Yeah, and I think the first time I really got gripped into story might have been Final Fantasy VII, like,
Oh yeah.
and,
Oh
like,
yeah.
I was really into it, and then when my character died, and I forget the female lead name, Cloud's girlfriend or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
I was, like, really upset, like, I was like, "Oh my god, no, she's, like,
Yeah.
really dead? Like, I can't get her back?" Like, it was
Oh,
wild.
well, and I don't know if you've ever played the Eco. It was the precursor to Shadow of the Colossus. Um,
Mm,
and it is a game where you are carrying um, this frail girl behind you through this dungeon with these dark spirits. Um, and you never, hear a name, you never have a dialogue. But by the end of this game, you've been, working to save her life and confront your own dark side and everything else. There is a legitimate, just absolute affection and care for this person, and the great games really tap into that. I mean,
Yeah.
want to talk about great storytelling without a word of dialogue, even Shadow of the Colossus, which I know so many developers, we love to point to that one as a game where you are just in this mysterious wilderness with gigantic beings stomping around, and you've got to figure out what's going on and how to take them down and why you're taking them down, because some of them are majestic and even beautiful. And that's that kind of synchronicity we're talking about storytelling through music, through the visuals, through the design
Yeah.
itself, can be so powerful.
I feel like a game I really got engrossed in and just loved as a kid too was also just the first Diablo. Like it was so like I'd never played anything like it in the procedural dungeons, and then like understanding what was going on. Like when I played Diablo 4, it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna kill the demons and yeah, what but I didn't even know what was really going on, and like it was just exciting, and the crawl I
Oh,
was like really like a hardcore dungeon crawl. Like it was
and I
really awesome.
promise you, if you put on that music right now from that first
Yep.
Diablo, that kind of clinky of like pseudo western sort of thing, you would immediately have a rush of feeling
Yep.
of being right there and stay a while and listen. That the
Decker
whole
Kane, let's go,
the Decker
dude.
Kane, and you know,
Yeah.
and again, I don't know there are any other forms of media that can
Yeah.
give your DNA like these ones
Just
can.
cure that
They are
fresh
lived
meat,
experience.
like with the butcher. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
dude, it's so good.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it just like it becomes a part of like your life, and like you said, you
yep,
can just I can think about just the way like that chung, chung, as I'm like clicking through the UI, and like just the way the
yeah,
things move, and like all those noises like become like these very nostalgic, like
yeah,
meaningful experiences, and it's just sound effects, or it's just a clip, or
yeah,
just the music, or like it's really all of it.
yeah.
Like you said, it all compiles nicely. I think something Blizzard did that I recognized really good, that was really amazing early on, was like put so much emphasis in the UI design and the actual interface of the game
Yeah,
and the menus
yeah,
and the words. Like everything was absolutely custom made from scratch. Like it inspired everything that I did, that actually became my company Epic Made, because like I like as I was studying design, I was like, this is all like, it was like, well, as I was coming up through design school, it was like very flat and clean and white space all the time. I was like, this is not my jam. Like, I want textures and layers. I want everything to look like it's carved out of rock or wood or
yeah,
stone, or like, like everything to be bolted together with metal. And like,
yeah.
so it's just, it's interesting. And all that kind of layers into the narrative, right? Like you
I,
said, they all have to make sense. Like you can't do that if the environment of the game doesn't make sense and the story you're telling doesn't make
yeah.
sense, right?
Well,
Like,
and there's a secret ingredient to that a lot of, I don't think, outside of the studio universe you realize is the games that have that complete um, harmony between UI, UX, and story and music and design. It's because everybody on the team is playing the games and they
yeah,
love that game and they're part of that. And there are a lot of studios you'll go to where it's kind of a 9 to 5 job for a lot of people, and sometimes the people on the team don't play the games or any games. They're just there to do their part and send it in. But when you've got a team that they get together and they all have that shared vision and they all have that, they're all part of the caravan, I guess you could say, that
yeah,
are
yeah,
marching in sync as they go through this. And and I'm not saying that, I know sometimes the hours on into development are ungodly, and you don't need to be, staying every night and every weekend. But if you're not at least sometimes so taken, so swept along by the mystery and the majesty of what you're building right there, you're not gonna, I think, have that harmonizing creative effort that you see in so many other studios. And again, like I mentioned, it's the expansion we did for Nazi Zombies, where the whole team felt like we built this, we pulled this out of the fire and forged
yeah,
this thing, and the whole team was sticking around extra hours, just not be to be diligent hard workers, but because we couldn't leave it alone,
yeah.
and that's the sort of stuff where great games come from that, and I think the audience and players can feel that when they pick up the game.
It's passion, right? Like it's because you're in the right place at the right time doing the
Yeah,
right things with with the skills that you have, and it's all coming together, and you're in that team environment, and it's like,
yeah,
I speak at universities all the time, and to like, just I try to give back as much as possible, right? So I go talk to
uh,
some of the young creatives, and I'm like, look, you can take these skills you're learning in art school and put them on anywhere, and
Yeah.
especially if you're doing design and like these kind of things. So what I need you to do is try a little bit of everything. And then when you're working on something and you can't put it down and you're like, oh, what if I did this? Or what if I did that? And you're laying in bed, it's like, oh, I could go at it this way and do that thing. And I tried this.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're in the right place. Like
Yeah.
follow that feeling, right?
Mhm.
And because you don't want to have like when you in this type of field, especially when it's so competitive and there's so many people that would love to do this, like
Right.
you can't just phone it in and do a
Yeah.
9 to 5 and then
Yeah.
expect anything actually exceptionally good to come out of it. You might be
Yeah.
able to make something that like is sort of unremarkable. Maybe it pays for itself, probably not. But like
Yeah.
you got to really be able to dump your heart and soul into this
Yeah.
because you love it.
Yeah. I think that it's the thing whenever I talk to my teams, about we're starting a new project, um, I let them, I'm like, "Just, we need to all live here." And that doesn't mean the studio, it means in this world, whether it's Azeroth, whether it's, 1945 Germany, uh, we need to go home and be dreaming about this and thinking about this, because
Yeah.
that's when your synapses make those mysterious, unpredictable connections. That's where you get these, you know, the island of Heligoland off the coast of Germany, or you get, this new version, this new expansion into Azeroth, and that's where you find Northrend, and that's how you find uh, a new level of sanctuary. It all comes through um, being there and realizing, oh, there's a shadowy corner we haven't explored yet. And if my subconscious is tapping into that, just like we have, a lot of ideas sometimes springing up from similar places, that's both a liability and a superpower. The
Yep.
superpower is if I can tap into that, and there are millions of people who that corner of their mind is still kind of sparking in that direction. Maybe I can just carry the torch into that, and they'll follow.
I
So
love it, man. So look, a lot of times I assume there's a lot of scenarios where you have to build teams and like you have to
yeah,
kind of assemble
yeah,
some people, whether like, you know, so what when you're making those decisions, about, creative partners or, narrative designers and that kind of stuff,
right.
what separates like a strategic collaborator from like, hey, these people are talented, we might be able to plug them in, we might not, versus like we got to add this person in because they're just going to bring so much.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it's funny, I think it comes down to what are the kind of conversations you're having together? It's
Yeah.
I love working with the team where it's not a case of, "What do you want me to do?" And they're asking for super clear instructions, and they don't wanna step outside of that, versus them coming to me with like, "Oh, what if?" Or and you give them a
Yeah.
suggestion, and they might, nobody wants to work with yes men all the time anyway, and I try to push back against that. But what if it's a yes? Okay, that's good. But what if this? And what if we played into this? And that's where you get that that beauty of the whole being greater than the sum of the parts that can happen with,
Yeah.
and where I put down, I had a very specific elements that I like to storyboard. I usually have a stack of cards and post-its everywhere, because sometimes it's easier to just do a quick little jot that down and put it up on the wall in a series than, taking 15 minutes to describe something. But the reason I do them on these little cards, because you can crumple them up easily and swap them out with something else. And people that come to my office know, like, they're a part of that storyboard. They're a part of what's happening right there. And sometimes it will go in a crazy direction. Um, and my first instinct, now, is just to be like, let's chase it. Let's see what's there. In storyboard format, we can go anywhere and see where it ends up. And half the time it'll be like, oh, that's a dead end. We can't do that. That's going to break our logic. That's going to break our magic. That's going to, but because we explore that, like, oh, but what if it didn't? And how could we change things to make it? And are we making assumptions here? Um, so yeah, I try to keep, a lot of studios have, there's the brainstorm phase, and then you shift into the more pragmatic, we're locking this in. And I always like to keep a little window open for that brainstorming. Uh, you gotta keep it just wide enough for great new ideas, not wide enough for feature creep, which, is a whole other issue.
Right. Yeah. Hey, can't have that feature creep. Next thing you know, everything's all the budgets and timelines are shot.
That'll kill you. That'll kill you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, look, this went really fast, Cameron, and we are coming up close on time. But I do have one last question for you. Is there anyone or anything in your career you'd like to shout out to the audience? Maybe a mentor, a valuable resource, or favorite client?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Earlier on, we talked about this little team that we put together coming out of college, and the they we struggled. We didn't sleep some nights and weekends and putting this all together. And they've since gone on to do more interesting creative feats. But I don't know that my own trajectory would be the same if it hadn't been for Donald Mustard and Bert Lewis, Orlando Barrows, Jeremy Mustard, and Nathan Trawartha, Jared Trulock. That was the original core crew for Chair Entertainment. And I still look back on conversations we had initially then that really, set the course for me creatively. Um, and so, absolutely want to give them a shout out. And I know that they've found their own success across the industry in a dozen different ways. You'd be hard pressed to find a successful game of the past 20 years that team has not touched in some way. So,
That's pretty incredible to say.
right.
Wow. Amazing. And shout out to the LinkedIn platform where we connected and then did some
Yep.
networking. And, here we are. Now we're friends. We did a podcast episode. Pretty cool platform. It's wild, like how much cool stuff can come from there when you use a tool properly, right? So,
Yep. Yeah.
all right. Well,
Absolutely.
we've been talking with Cameron Dayton, and you can check him out at catdaddygames.com. But if listeners want to follow up with you directly, where should they go?
LinkedIn is a fantastic place to connect, and I think that is a great forum. That's how we connected, and
Yeah.
I'm open for meeting new people and having conversations about any and all this stuff. As you know, I get way too verbose at times, so if you're with the conversation going long, absolutely reach out.
I love it. All right. And that's linkedin.com/IN and then Cameron Dayton. Just written
Cameron
down.
Dayton. Yep.
All right, cool. All right, Cameron. Well, thank you for being on the show. This was so much fun. And if this episode sparked something for you, please share it with your friends or colleagues, and we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
We really hope you enjoyed the show. Please like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through the world of art and business on the Pixel Retentive Podcast.